I've never been a very sociable kid. To be completely honest, I've never really seen the point of it. People talk about the same things over and over again. Meaningless things. The weather, the weekend, work, school. As I've gotten into my late teens, I've grown to loathe it. Whenever I hear the kids in my classes or in the halls talking about the same old crap and giggling, my blood boils. People avoid me mostly, which can be expected. A few of the more brutish kids pick on me, but I just ignore them. I spend my weekends alone, indoors. I like to play the piano in my spare time. It's very therapeutic. It's like my meditation. When I'm playing it, I usually think about life. I think about people and my general dislike towards them. I think about the kids who pick on me at school, and I think about the recent disappearance of kids in my surrounding area. They were all kids of similar age to myself, mostly girls, some even from my school, my classes. There have been 8 in total. I've been keeping track of them, you see. I follow their stories in the newspapers quite closely. I'm very keen on what the police find at their scene, and always keep an eye out for any evidence they find that might lead them to the killer. The profiles are always the same. They are usually discovered in back alleys, or in ditches, always with their throats slit in a clean and precise manner. The curious part that the police can't seem to figure out is why the victims always have their tongues removed, ripped out from their jaws, and I quote the newspaper when I say this, while the victims were still alive. They say it's the worst serial killing that they've seen in the country for years. The killer is calm, meticulous, and leaves not one shred of evidence at the crime scenes. Whatever the reason, my classes have been getting noticeably quieter as the noisiest of the kids all one by one have gone missing, only to be found days later, mutilated and dumped, as if they were trash. It's so much more pleasant. I can concentrate properly now. There's still one girl in my class though, who really grinds my gears with her high-pitched whiny voice, and that piercing laugh that seems to penetrate deep into my skull every time I have the displeasure of hearing it. I heard her again today, loud and irritating as usual, and couldn't help thinking that she used that tongue of hers way too much. I might even go as far to say that she didn't deserve to have it at all. Back in the 1990s, a girl committed suicide after viewing an image posted in an old news group. The image is of a figure, which some identified as a woman, standing in the middle of a lonely road. The figure is transparent to the point that its legs are barely visible, and it is illuminated by an unknown light source coming from the direction of the camera. Whether it's headlights, a handheld flashlight, or the light of a camera itself isn't known for sure, as the actual source of the image has never been identified. No facial features can be made out, but the figure is most easily identified by its long bony appendages, which partly resemble a spider's legs. Those who have seen the image or know of its existence have come to know the figure as the Wanderer. The first known Wanderer account occurred in 1996. Jane, a college girl who was visiting her family during the holiday season, had an interest in the paranormal. She saw the Wanderer image on a news group, along with a message reading, "Do you see me? I can see you too." Dozens of other users saw the same post. Most didn't think much of it, just that it somehow looked funny. Some actually complained that they experienced headaches while they looked at the image, and similar claims have been made by others since. According to Jane's family, she suffered from the nightmares in the nights after seeing the image. She claimed that she would wake up and see the Wanderer outside her window. Sometimes, it would scrape the glass with its spider-like limbs, but usually, it would just stand there and stare at her. She would find herself unable to move while in its presence, as if many unseen hands were holding her down. Even if she closed her eyes, she would still see it. Her family was sure that she had just been frightened by an image online and was having nightmares as a result, until Jane complained of seeing the Wanderer in her waking life as well. She was convinced that it was following her. She would see it even while she was in a room full of people or out in public, though no one else saw anything. Jane's family feared for her sanity, but assured her that the Wanderer wasn't real. Jane, however, only got worse. She began going to extreme lengths to stay awake at night. It started out just with caffeine and staying active, but quickly graduated to cutting herself and screaming all through the night. Before long, she wasn't sleeping at all. She was convinced that if she slept again, the Wanderer would take her. Her family knew that they couldn't just wait and hope for the best. Jane needed help. But when Jane's mother knocked on her daughter's bedroom door, she received no answer. She carefully opened the door, not wanting to disturb or startle Jane, but she still heard nothing. Jane wasn't in her bed. She wasn't sitting at her computer. She didn't appear to be in her room at all, until her mom checked the closet. There, Jane was found curled in the corner. Blood reddened the front of her body, having drained from the long slit across her throat. She was clutching a blood-stained note, which read, "It can't have me now." Jane's case is not isolated. Through the rest of the 90s, dozens of others went missing or committed suicide after viewing the image of the Wanderer. Since the turn of the century, despite my best efforts at locating the image, it seems to have disappeared. Recently, though, I posted on a news group asking if anyone has heard about the Wanderer. I've done this many times before. Usually, there's one or two people who have heard of the story, but none have seen the image. This time was different. Shortly after posting, I received an email in my inbox. The subject of the email was, "I can see you." The body only read, "Do you see me? I can see you too." There was an image attached with the message. I can't verify if it's the real Wanderer image or not, but I must warn you that if you choose to view it, you do so at your own risk. Ever tried to figure out what that thing that always lurks inside your mind was? Haunting your dreams? Eating you in your nightmares? Now you can finally face him. Talk to him. But be careful. Who knows what can happen to you? It must be a new moon night in December. When it's exactly 1:28 in the morning, you must go to bed wearing plain white clothing. The same rule applies to your bedsheet. If you don't have any white bed sheets, don't put them on your bed or the ritual won't work. Lay down. Act like you're sleeping, but I suggest you to not sleep on your back because it might be more painful. Close your eyes and wait until you start to hear whispers coming from behind your door. When you start to hear those frightful whispers, say in a low voice, "Come to me. I want to talk." If done correctly, the door will open and you will suddenly fall asleep. Otherwise, you will just sleep normally. While sleeping, you will instantly wake up inside a small room with 2 windows in opposite walls. Outside the windows, there are endless night skies raining blood both up and down. There's nothing but a table, 2 chairs, and blood. Blood everywhere. Act like you don't mind that, not at all. Just get the closest chair and sit down. Say confidently, "I'm here." The door in the other side of the room will open, and it will come. A creature that will have an unspeakable appearance will appear. But somehow, you will feel like you're just facing that thing that you were most afraid of, whether it's a person, an object, or a place. Just stare at the creature as it approaches and sits down. Don't panic. It won't hurt you. At least, not physically. The creature will start to talk. Its voice will give you shivers that even your soul will feel. But act like you don't mind. Just listen. It'll talk about the secrets of your life, your future, and will speak about the scary truth of your existence. You still have to avoid reacting, despite how unsettling and utterly frightening it is. Otherwise, it will attack you, and you will die in your sleep. Once he stops talking, you will know. He will lean his head on his right fist. You shall say at this time, "I understand. Am I worthy to know?" He will ask to see your hand. Show it. Do not disobey. If you do correctly, he will put something in your hand. You can't tell what it is at that moment, but when that happens, you will wake up, and it'll be exactly 7 in the morning. You will notice something in your hand. It will be closed. Open it. Do not worry. Yet. You will see what the monster placed in your hand. It can be one of these 4 possibilities. If you see a quarter in your hand, every night will give you a very pleasant dream. If you see a little rubber duck, your dreams will be memories of your childhood. If it's a little key, you'll be able to see your friend's secrets through your dreams. But if there's nothing at all, the next time you sleep, you will never wake up again. The effects of the objects last exactly 6 days. After that, your nights will get back to normal. But I shall tell you, during these 6 days, never get rid of those objects. Always take them with you, all the time. The creature knows what you're doing. Dark, cold and eerie. Those are the only words I can come up with to describe the house in which I had lived with my family for a majority of my life. Mostly dark, blistering cold during the winter, and always eerie. Sometimes there would be strange noises coming from the cellar too. It had often given me the creeps, though I would never admit that to my mother. I'd figured I was too old to let some silly noises scare me anyway. I had been trying to act like a man of the house ever since my dad left when I was 7. I had always hoped that I would never turn out like my father, whom I've hated with a burning passion. As far as he goes, I suppose I'd better just leave it at that. I lived in the house with my mother, Linda, and my uncle Kevin, on a vast piece of land in Steinen, Indiana. Steinen was a tiny piece of shit in the middle of nowhere. Nobody liked living there. I didn't have any friends because I was homeschooled, and I'd never even seen another kid my age in Steinen, since we almost never left the house unless Mom wanted to go into town to buy groceries. However, I was always very close to Uncle Kevin. When I was little, he would tell me ghost stories right before bed, which my mother always hated. "Stop it, Kevin. You're going to give him nightmares," she would snap. Oh, I did get nightmares indeed, and sometimes it seemed as though the nightmares refused to end. They crept into the back of my mind like a spider crafting its web. The story he told most often was one about a monster with a contorted body and black eyes. According to the legend, as Kevin called it, even though I knew he made it up himself, the monster would come into your room if you were awake past your bedtime and hide in your closet, watching you the whole night. Of course, this was just a silly little tale that Kevin would tell me so I wouldn't stay up late. Even so, I can't tell you how many times that horrible creature has popped into my head over the years. On this particular night, I decided to go to bed early in an attempt to sleep off a pounding headache. I lied down on my icy bed and sank underneath the covers, hiding my face from whatever may have been lurking inside my head. After setting my glasses down on the nightstand beside my bed, I reached over and flicked the light off. The darkness made me feel alive, in a very strange way, almost as though I was mesmerized by the nothingness. As I looked around the room, seeing almost nothing but the pitch black darkness surrounding me, I felt entranced, as if something was forcing me to look. Of course, there was nothing to look at least not with the eyes. This was something you could only witness within the deepest corridors of your mind, the part of your mind that you always dread visiting and can never seem to return from. Out of nowhere, I began to hear scratches upon the window above my bed. My eyes immediately burst open, and I felt like I was unable to close them again. What the fuck was that? I asked myself. Nothing, of course. It was nothing. It couldn't have been anything, right? Right? Just my mind playing tricks on me in the dark. No big deal. But in a moment of childish curiosity, I decided to peer out the window, just to make sure I was hearing nothing more than a tree branch brushing up against the glass. But then it hit me like a bag of bricks. There is no tree next to my window. Still, I decided it would be better to sleep it off and think more about it in the morning. It was probably all in my head. It had to be. I found it unusually difficult to fall asleep that night, as if somebody or something was trying to keep me up. I woke up the next morning with that sound still locked in my brain. It had to have been coming from somewhere. But where? Shit. I had no idea. But then I remembered. The cellar. I built up as much courage as I could muster and slowly crept down into the abyss. Jesus. I hadn't been down there in a year, maybe longer. I had almost forgotten what it looked like. Nothing but clouds of cobwebs and stacks of cardboard boxes shoved against walls. I rustled through a couple of boxes until I stumbled upon a picture I'd drawn when I was a child. It was a sketch of a grotesque creature. It definitely wasn't human. This thing barely even had a face, just dark black eyes and no mouth. Its body was tall and thin, and was contorted into a shape that I had never even seen before. The more I looked at the drawing, the more I reminded myself of that story that my uncle used to tell me. It appeared to be raining above the creature, and toward the bottom of the paper I had scribbled, "Please stay awake," in giant letters. I didn't know what the hell that was supposed to mean, but I folded up the paper and stuffed it in my pocket. I quickly made my way up the staircase into the kitchen and went about my day as usual, keeping that drawing in mind, trying to remember what it meant and why I'd drawn it in the first place. I looked outside and noticed that it had begun to rain again. I didn't want to think about the creature any longer, so I walked into my dimly lit room and plopped onto my bed. I fell asleep before I even knew it. When I awoke, it was exactly 3 a.m. This night was colder and darker than usual. The farm was soaked with rain from earlier in the evening. The moon was full and radiant. It almost didn't look real. For an instant, I glanced out my bedroom window, and I could swear I saw something quickly walking through the yard. When it spotted me, it slunk behind a tree, as if it were trying to hide from me. It looked exactly like what I had drawn when I was a child. I ran into Uncle Kevin's room and began shaking him awake. "Kevin! Kevin!" He rubbed the room out of his eyes. "What's up, bud? It's late," he asked, bewildered at my excitement. I looked him in his bloodshot eyes and softly said, "I saw someone in the yard." Kevin looked at me with hesitation. "No, you probably just saw an animal. Get back to bed." I know what I saw. This was no animal, or at least, not one that I'd ever seen. Not even in my worst fucking nightmares. I knew I couldn't tell him exactly what I had seen, as he would never believe me. "No, Kevin. It was not an animal, please. It was a man. I think. Look, just please go out and check." Uncle Kevin leapt up and grabbed a shotgun from under the bed. "All right, come on. Show me where he is. Let's try not to wake your mom. I'll scare the fucker off." We went outside, and I pointed to the tree. I whispered to Kevin, "I saw him go behind that tree." My uncle bravely walked up to the tree and peered around it. Nothing. He searched the entire farm for well over half an hour, but he never did find anything. "Let's go back in, bud. There's no one out here. Keep the doors locked tonight." He was wrong. I knew there was something out there. I crawled into bed and threw the covers over my face. I could hear the blistering wind coming in from outside. It pierced my ears with a whistle that I only thought the dogs could detect. Suddenly, I heard a tapping sound on my window. The sound grew louder with each tap. I tightened the blankets around my body. The taps slowly turned into knocks. Louder and faster the knocks became. The knocks turned into bangs. I thought the glass was going to break. Then, out of nowhere, it stopped. No more taps. No more knocks. No more bangs. No more wind. I was relieved. Suddenly, I heard a low, chilling voice in my ear. "Please stay awake." It couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. I ran into the hallway, ready to make my way to my mother's room when I saw it. Whatever it was, I still don't know. It was holding Kevin's lifeless, mangled body in its arms. Carved deeply into my uncle's torso were the words, "Please stay awake." I tried to let out a scream, but only silence filled the dead air. I sprinted through the door of my mother's bedroom and saw her body lying in the middle of the floor. She was covered in blood and her left arm had been ripped straight out of its socket. Written next to her, in her own blood, were the words, "Please stay awake." I began to sob, and when I turned around, the creature was gone. I don't know where the hell it went, and I'm not sure I want to. I closed my eyes as tightly as I could and let out the loudest scream I could muster. I called the police and lied down in the cold, now blood-soaked floor, waiting for them to arrive. It felt like hours. Finally, the police showed up to find me in the fetal position next to my mother's corpse. I told them everything I saw, I showed them my drawings. I told them about the taps, the knocks, the bangs. I told them what I'd seen outside, but of course, they wouldn't hear a word of it. Why would they? All they could see was a lonely kid hovering over his dead mother, her blood covering my clothes almost as much as it covered the floor. It's cold in this cell. It's dark and lonely. The silence is the only saving grace. Constant, peaceful silence. Tonight it's raining outside. It's colder, darker, and wetter than ever. But, unfortunately, I must stop writing now. I just heard a tap on my window. There's a video on the internet that goes by the name of We Kept Driving. This video depicts a man driving down a rainy road at night following a black car into nowhere. However, this video is merely a distraction from the audio. You see, the audio in this video is designed with malicious intent. At first, it might seem like a slightly unsettling two-tone, repeated every 10 seconds, but this feeling of unsettlement is the feeling that the creator of this video wanted. After a few seconds, a man will start speaking to the viewer in Russian. It is unclear what the man is talking about, but he appears to be quite relaxed about whatever he is speaking about. Apparently, upon multiple viewings of the video, strange artifacts will appear in the video, such as the video changing size, the picture blurring, the speech of the Russian man changing, and weird, distorted noises playing over the top of the two-tone. There have also been reports of nosebleeds, headaches, depression, and paranoia whilst watching the video. The final effect of the video is one that doesn't seem to be caused by other horror-based videos. Pain in the wrist and ankles, as well as an inability for the video to fade out. The video will keep playing at a constant volume, even if you turn your speakers down, off entirely, or walk away from the video, almost as if the video has buried itself deep into your subconscious. However, if you start off with the video on mute, the video will stay mute. It only seems to keep playing at the highest volume you have it set to. Apparently, playing the video at a high volume results in more damaging side effects such as seizures, migraines, loss of sight for the duration of the video, out-of-body experiences, and hallucinations of a white man standing to the right of the viewer, about 3 feet away. Keep looking left. During this time, it's worth noting that the video can only be seen in 360p, and that the video also has the ability to change to lag and or crash your computer. Viewer discretion is advised. The final side effect of this video is extreme paranoia around windows. If you look into or around a window during the time the video is playing, you may see people standing outside, looking at you directly. All the people who watch the video claim to have had dreams after watching the video. The majority of the dreams are loosely connected. However, there are a few connecting themes. 2 teenage boys being chased by some unscapable entity, security cameras, illogical amounts of blood, traumatic experiences, and strange, undefinable floating objects. Most of these dreams end with the dream jumping out of the window or smashing a window. It is unknown whether the video still exists, but if it does, run. The man in the video is not a friend.
He uses the video as a tracker to find his next victim. I must leave now, as he is after me. I watched it too much.
I remember when you were just a little girl. Your mother and I tried our best to give you a home where you couldn't get hurt, since we lived in a bit of a shady part of town. When you were just a toddler, you would always follow me around the house with that cute little smile of yours, showing me that you still loved me, even after what I had done to the family. Maybe you didn't know that I divorced your mother and took custody of you because of your undeveloped brain. No, a child naturally loves his or her mother more, right? Anyways, remember that time at Jack's 10th birthday, when you accidentally tripped and fell face first into the large cake? You were so embarrassed and you felt so sorry, but everyone was laughing. Not at you, but with you. I washed your face off, but then you started crying. You asked me why you were such a mess up. I told you that you were just 9 and still making some mistakes, but mistakes help make you a good person. You countered my question almost instantly with another. How does falling into a cake make me a better person? We both snickered and moved on, but you asking me why you thought you were a mess up surprised me, but I let it go. Do you remember visiting your uncle for the first time and seeing your slightly older cousins? You were so shy in front of them, it was actually adorable. They saw you by a tree in the front yard and tried to get you to play, but you just hid behind it. It looked like you were about to cry. I'll tell you, it took ages for you to break out of your shell and play with them, but it was worth it. You formed a bond with your cousins and no one else could break it. I guess that's the thing about you. The way your personality is built, you're shy and lonely, so when you get a friend, you naturally form a strong bond with him or her. Hey, you formed a strong bond with me too, even though I was just your father. With the ways I acted and talked, it felt like I was just a stranger. Yet, you know when someone says, a man changes when he becomes a father. I realized when you were born that I couldn't hurt you. But that makes this even more difficult. The man clenches the handle of his already loaded .44 Magnum. He stands on the other end of a closed door, left hand on the knob, and ready to burst in. I can't say you're not my daughter anymore. I know you are somewhere deep inside that monstrous shell. The man's eyes begin to drip salty liquid as he clenches the doorknob. I need to end your suffering, sweetie. Just one shot to the head and it'll be over. It'll be quick. Soft grunts and snarls come from the other end of the door where the man stands. I love you, sweetie. He quickly twists the knob and throws the door open, seeing his bloodied and disfigured daughter on the bed, eating a rotten corpse. It only took one shot. I've always loved the dark. It feels so warm and welcoming. Like a mask, hiding all the stress and emotion that the daylight shows so explicitly and replacing them with a sensuous feeling. The dark reveals your true nature and abolishes the facade you play during the daytime. Yes, the dark is good. You can be yourself in the dark and not feel judged or threatened all the while by being yourself. That's why I love the night so much. You can just relax in the blackness, surrounded by nothing but shadow. Allowing the dark to overcome your senses and numb them down until you feel nothing at all but complete weightlessness. Then, when sleep finally takes control, you're thrusted into an even deeper darkness. Infinite darkness. Just black empty space. An endless void your mind creates to help you drift off into unconsciousness. But why? Why is it always black? Have you ever thought about that? Whenever we close our eyes, we're met with black. But why? You don't notice it, do you? You don't think about it. It's just there. Like breathing, blinking. After a while, your subconsciousness just accepts that when we close our eyes, we see darkness. Empty darkness. Why is it then that people are scared of the dark? An average human being will sleep for 229,961 hours of their lifetime. For one whole third of their life, they will live in darkness. Complete and utter darkness. If we're really scared of the dark, why do we have the ability to close our eyes and sleep for so long? So long in the black oblivion. You see, I think no one is truly afraid of the dark. That's just an illusion. An illusion we produce to trick ourselves into thinking that there is no such thing as monsters. We've all heard the stories, haven't we? About the night terrors that roam around at night, claws raised, teeth bared, ready to attack the young, naive child as they sleep in their beds, unaware of their demonic presence because they can't see them. Don't lie to yourself. You were like that once, sitting awake, clutching at the sheets as you stare at your ceiling, or glancing around your room. Perhaps you had a nightlight, a holy crucifix of sorts that was used to ward off the monsters, to protect you. Well, I think, as you grow up, you begin to tell yourself that in all of your childlike innocence, you were never scared of the evil that lurked in the shadows. You were simply afraid of the dark. That's what you believe. As you grow up, you tend to grow out of this fear and relish in the dark like I do. But this fear can remain with you in adulthood. In fact, it's one of the most common phobias, nyctophobia. Even as a fully matured adult, you still fear the emptiness. Or do you? You see, the statistics prove that when we spend a long time sleeping, a long time in the dark, we never seem to mind, even if we were terribly scared of the darkness. But why? I think your subconsciousness is telling you that they are still there. A small part of you holds strong on your childhood memories of being alone in the dark with the night terrors. But this time, you have no light to guard you. Obviously, adults don't tend to own these little lights anymore, do they? They say that they don't need them anymore. They call it a silly childhood fear of the dark. They say there is no such thing as night terrors. But what do they know? If they lived long enough to mature into adulthood, they've probably never seen one. My opinion is that we all have nyctophilia, a general love for the dark that helps us sleep. Even those that claim that they have a fear for the night, they love the dark. I love the dark. You were never really scared of the dark. It really was an illusion of our minds created to reassure ourselves that we are safe at night. To reassure us that there are no such things as night terrors. I love the dark. I always have. It feels homely, warm and comforting. Like I've always been in the dark. It's fun being in the dark, feeling free, feeling safe. I know you like the dark too. When you come home from work, tired and tense, and you flop onto your bed, stretching your aching muscles, getting ready to sleep. Yes, you love the dark. I know. You still fear it though. An occasional scan around the room before you allow your body to shift into sleep mode. It's amusing, really. You know damn straight what you fear, and it ain't the dark. It's me. I like watching you sleep. The way you toss and turn. The way you sigh contently when you get comfortable. The way you jump in surprise when you hear a noise. You haven't changed much when you were a child. Not really. You still fear me. But this time, I'm not going to let you get away. You are unprotected now. No nightlight. No nothing. Completely and utterly alone in the dark. With me. I've always loved the dark. So have you.
I'm a photographer, self-taught to be exact. At the moment, I'm working in my dark room to develop some pictures for my portfolio. The pictures are resting in trays filled with chemicals. One, a mixture, another acetic acid, and the last with ammonium thiosulfate. That's one thing that I learned about photography. You have to wait. You have to be patient. I have a confession to make. I don't like showing people my work. I know that sounds ridiculous. What kind of photographer doesn't want to show their work to the world? Isn't that the point of photography? To catch a moment in time and share it. Well, I'm just embarrassed. You see, I don't like rejection. Not after I was rejected by Insight, a popular people's magazine. Their claim is that they only post articles and artwork from average, everyday people. I got my hopes up, and I shouldn't have. I remember being so excited, so eager when I met with the senior photographer of Insight. It was a dream come true. It was small talk at first and coffee. But then I showed him my portfolio. I watched as his demeanor changed, and our meeting ended shortly afterward. He claimed that I didn't have the photographer's eye, that my work was unoriginal, useless to the magazine. I refused to believe him at first. One person's opinion shouldn't mean anything, but after hearing those words, I eventually accepted them. I didn't have the photographer's eyes. Photographers tend to have themes in their work. Some take pictures of nature while others photograph buildings or weddings. My work was cliched. It was a mixture of everything: puppies, couples, flowers, and sunsets. It was terrible, unoriginal. I was on the verge of giving up. I found my photographer's eye, despite it being in an untraditional way. My passion returned, and I realized what my theme would be. Eyes. Hear me out on this. Eyes are the windows to the human emotion. There's happiness, fear, anger, surprise, sadness, and so much more to capture in photographs. Eyes are the perfect subjects, but not in a literal sense. It's not easy taking pictures of someone's eyes. Most people don't like getting their pictures taken, and people are always on the move. I'm not some creep. After I photograph someone's eyes, I let them know about it, and I explain my project to them. Most people don't appreciate it, so a lot of my pictures are a frustration or surprise. Anger is pretty popular too. You know, I felt so confident lately that I'm letting my girlfriend tour my dark room today. She's never seen it before, and I'm so excited to show her. By now, my pictures have finished developing, and I pinned them on a clothesline to dry. These pictures were taken in a local bakery. I love going there. Everyone is so happy, especially Sarah, a young woman that works there. We're familiar with each other because I frequent the bakery often. She's happy to pose for me if I buy a few sweets. It's a pleasant exchange. I'm just glad that she humors me. Despite my recent confidence, there has always been a few doubts in the back of my mind. It took me a while to figure it out. It's my girlfriend. I take photographs of her often, but her eyes aren't as happy anymore. I don't understand why. I compared recent photographs to photographs of her eyes from a few months ago, and there has been a deliberate change. Something must be bothering her. I tried to ignore it at first, but it's starting to interfere with my work. I feel like it's because I've been spending a little more time with my camera than her. She's always understood in the past, though. I cross over to a dark cabinet filled with developing equipment, lenses, and Polaroids. I nudge an old camera aside and remove a giant glass jar filled with preservatives. I set the jar on the counter and smile down at its contents. In the red glare of my safe light, I see two eyes staring back at me. I brush my finger across the surface of the jar and take a deep breath. It's a simple procedure. Well, I wouldn't call it a procedure without all the necessary equipment. Trust me though, I've done this with the senior photographer of Insight. He's how I got my photographer's eyes. And don't worry, I found a suitable replacement for him. 20/20 vision too. I do regret the scarring though. I was a bit nervous, so I had a shaky hand when amputating them. To my knowledge, the procedure was extremely successful. I mean, look at me. If I operated on myself, I can operate on another person. I know it will work. With Sarah's eyes, my girlfriend will finally be happy again. I hear footsteps on the stairs, and I smile as I hear a knock on the darkroom door. Come in, sweetheart.
It was a nice summer day. My 5-year-old son James was playing outside in the backyard of our suburban home. James has always been a quiet boy. He plays by himself mostly. He never had many friends, but he has a wild imagination. I was in the kitchen feeding our dog Fido when I heard what sounded like James talking to someone in the backyard. I'm not sure who it was he could be talking to. Could he have finally made a friend? Being a single mom, it's hard for me to always keep an eye on my son, so I decided to go outside and to check on him. When I went into the backyard, I was a bit confused, because James was the only one back there. Was he talking to himself? I could have sworn I heard another voice. James, it's time to come inside, I called out to him. He came inside and sat down at the kitchen table. It was about lunchtime, so I decided to make him a turkey sandwich. James, who were you talking to out there? I asked. James looked up for a moment. I was playing with my new friend, he said, smiling. I poured him some milk and continued to pry, as any good mother would. Does your friend have a name? Why didn't you ask him to have lunch with us? I asked. James stared at me for a moment before replying. His name is Laughing Jack. I was a bit taken back by what he said. Oh, that's a strange name. What does your friend look like? I asked, a bit confused. He's a clown. He has long hair and a big swirly cone nose. He's got long arms and baggy pants with stripy socks, and he always smiles. I realized my son was talking about an imaginary friend. I suppose it's normal for kids his age to have imaginary friends, especially when he has no real kids to play with. It's probably just a phase. The rest of the day went by as per usual, and it was starting to get late, so I put James to bed. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss goodnight, and made sure to turn on his nightlight before I closed the door. I was pretty tired myself, so I decided to go to bed not too long after. I had an awful nightmare. It was dark. I was in some kind of rundown amusement park. I was scared, running through an endless field of empty tents, broken down rides, and abandoned game huts. The whole place had a horrible look to it. Everything was black and white. The prized stuffed animals all hung from nooses in the game huts, all with sick grins stitched onto their faces. It felt like the whole park was looking at me, even though there wasn't another living thing in sight. Then suddenly, I began to hear music play. The sounds of Pop Goes the Weasel being played on a squeeze box echoed through the park. It was hypnotizing. I followed its tune to a circus tent, almost in a trance, unable to stop my legs from moving forward. It was pitch black. The only light came from a single spotlight shining on the center of the big top. As I walked toward the light, the music slowed down. I found myself singing along, unable to stop. All around the mulberry bush, the monkey chased the weasel. The monkey thought 'twas all in fun. The music stopped right before its climax, and suddenly, the lights shot on. The intensity of the lights was practically blinding. All I could see was a small dark silhouette shuffle towards me. Then, another one appeared, and another, and another. There were dozens of them, all coming towards me. I couldn't move. My legs were frozen. All I could do was watch as the haunting figures drew nearer. As they got closer, I could see they were children. As I looked at each one of them, I noticed they were all horribly disfigured and mutilated. Some had cuts all over their body. Others were severely burnt, and others were missing limbs, even eyes. The children enveloped me, clawing at my flesh and dragging me to the ground and tearing inside of me. As the children tore me apart and I faded away, all I could hear was laughter. Horrible, awful, evil laughter. I woke up the next morning in a cold sweat. After taking a few breaths, I looked over and saw that a few of James's action figures were positioned facing me on top of my nightstand. I sighed. James had probably woken up early and put these here. I gathered up the toys and made my way to James's room. However, when I opened the door, James was sound asleep. I just shrugged and placed the toys back into his toy box and headed out for the living room. A little while later, James woke up and I made him his breakfast. He was quiet and seemed a bit groggy. Perhaps he didn't sleep well either. I decided to ask him about the toys. James, honey, did you put the toys in Mommy's room this morning? His eyes shot up at me for a moment, then quickly glanced back down at his cereal. Laughing Jack did it. I rolled my eyes and responded, well, you tell Laughing Jack to keep the toys in your room. James nodded and finished up his breakfast, then decided to go play out in the backyard. I went to relax in the living room, and I must have dozed off because I woke up a couple hours later. Shit, I need to check on James. I was a bit worried. It had been over 2 hours, and I haven't even checked on him. I went and stepped out into the backyard, but James wasn't there anymore. I was getting nervous, so I called out to him. James! James, where are you? Just then, I heard a giggle come from the front yard. I rushed through the gate, around to the front of the house. James was sitting on the sidewalk. I breathed a sigh of relief and walked over to him. James, how many times have I told you to stay in the backyard? James? What are you eating? James looked up at me, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a handful of hard candies in all colors. This made me very nervous. James, who gave you that candy? James just stared at me, not speaking. James, please, tell Mommy where you got that candy. James hung his head down and said, Laughing Jack gave it to me. My heart sunk. I kneeled down to look at him in the eye. James, I've had enough of this damn Laughing Jack thing. He is not real. Now this is a very serious situation, and I need to know who gave you that candy. I could see my son's eyes tear up. But Mama, Laughing Jack did give me that candy. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. James has never lied to me, but what he's telling me is impossible. I make him spit out the candy, and I throw the rest away. James appears to be fine. Maybe I'm just overreacting. After all, he could have gotten it from Tom and Linda from next door, or Mr. Walker down the street. Either way, I'm going to have to keep a closer eye on James. That night, I put James to bed as usual, and decided to go to bed early myself. Suddenly, I was woken up by a loud bang coming from the kitchen. I sprung out of bed and hurried down the stairs. When I got to the kitchen, I was horrified. Everything on the counters had been thrown to the floor, and our dog Fido hung dead from the light fixture. His stomach was cut open and stuffed with candy, the same type that James was eating earlier that day. My shock was quickly broken by a sharp scream coming from James's room, followed by loud crashes. I quickly grabbed a knife from the drawer and moved up the stairs with the speed that only a mother whose child is in danger could have. I burst through the door and flicked on the lights. Everything in the room was knocked over and tossed on the floor. My poor son in his bed, crying and shaking with fear, a pool of urine staining the sheets. I scooped my child up and ran out of the house and went next door to Tom and Linda's house. Luckily, they were still awake. They let me use their phone, and I called the police. It didn't take them long to arrive, and I explained what had happened. They looked at me as if I were crazy. They searched the house, but all they found was a dead dog and 2 trashed rooms. The officer had told me that someone had probably gotten into my house and done this right before making a quick escape when they heard me coming up the stairs. I knew it wasn't true. All the doors were locked, and none of the windows were open. Whatever was in my house didn't come in from outside. The next day, James stayed inside. I didn't want him to leave my sight. I went into the garage and found his old baby monitor and set it up in his room. If anything comes into it tonight, I was going to be able to hear it. I went to the kitchen and grabbed the largest knife from the drawer and put it on my nightstand. Imaginary friend or not, I'm not letting anything hurt my little boy. Soon enough, night came. I put James to bed. He was afraid, but I promised him that I wasn't going to let anything happen to him. I tucked him in, gave him a kiss, and turned on the nightlight. Before closing the door, I whispered to him, "Good night, James. I love you." I tried to stay up as long as I could, but after a few hours, I felt myself drifting off. My baby would be safe for the night, and I needed to sleep. Just as I laid my head on the pillow, I heard a soft noise come from the baby monitor I had put on my nightstand. At first, it sounded like interference, like the kind a radio would make. Then it turned into a soft moan. Was James asleep? Then I heard it, the laugh from my nightmare. That horrible laugh. I sprung up from my bed and then grabbed the knife from under my pillow. I rushed over to James's room and creaked the door open. I tried the light switch, but it wouldn't come on. I took a step in and I could feel the warm, thick liquid on my feet. Suddenly, James's nightlight came on and I could see the absolute horror laid out in front of me. James's body was nailed up on the wall, the nails piercing through his hands and feet. His chest was cut wide open, and his organs hung down to the floor. His eyes and tongue had been removed along with most of his teeth. I was disgusted. I could hardly believe this was my baby boy. Then I heard it again, the soft, desperate moan. James was still alive. My baby, my poor baby in so much pain, barely clinging to life. I ran across the room and vomited on the floor, but my sickness was interrupted by a horrible cackle coming from behind me. I spun around while still wiping bile from my mouth. Then out of the shadows emerged the fiend responsible for this horror, Laughing Jack. His ghost white skin and matted black hair hung down to his shoulders. He had piercing white eyes surrounded by dark black rings. His twisted smile revealed a row of sharp, jagged teeth, and his skin didn't look like skin at all. It almost looked like rubber or plastic. He wore a patchy, black and white clown outfit with striped sleeves and socks. His body itself was grotesque, his long arms hanging down past his waist, and the way he was poised made him look almost boneless, like a rag doll. He let out a sickening laugh, as if to let me know he was pleased with my reaction to his work. He then turned around slowly in front of James and began to laugh even more at the horrific sight he has laid out. That was enough to shake me from my terror. I snapped, "Get away from him, you bastard!" I rushed at the monster, raising the knife above my head and stabbed down at him. But as soon as the knife touched him, he disappeared into a cloud of black smoke. The knife passed right through and pierced James's still beating heart, splashing the warm blood on my face. No. What have I done? My baby. I killed my baby. I immediately fell to my knees, and I could hear the sirens in the distance growing louder. My boy. My sweet baby boy. I promised Mommy would protect you, but I failed. I'm sorry, James. I'm so sorry. Police soon arrived to find me in front of my son, still wielding the knife covered in my baby's blood. The trial was short. Insanity. I was placed in the Ferropolis house for the criminally insane, where I've been for the past 2 months. It's not so bad here. The only reason I'm awake now is because someone is playing Pop Goes the Weasel outside my window. I'll talk to the orderlies about it in the morning. Okay, so before I begin, I just want to say that this story is true. What I'm about to tell you really happened to me, and I'm not just saying so. This happened when I was a kid. We lived in a smaller house back then, and I shared a room with my elder sister. We had a bunk bed, and I slept in the bottom bunk, or I tried to. for no good reason. I was afraid to sleep there. My parents got tired of me crawling to sleep in their bed night after night, so they suggested that I would sleep next to my sister in the top bunk. My sister wasn't too fond of the idea, but she finally agreed, with the condition that I would sleep so that my head was lower, at the level of her chest, and not right next to hers, since I once punched her in my sleep, causing her nose to bleed. I, of course, accepted her term, since it got me out of the bottom bunk. I slept next to her, and everything seemed just fine. I no longer had nightmares, and I felt safer next to my sis. But then one night, I just couldn't sleep. My sister, on the other hand, was smiling contently in her dreams. I listened to her steady heartbeat and watched as her chest rose with each inhale. I listened to the silent sounds of the night when I saw something dark moving from the corner of my eye. Naturally, I turned to see what it was, but all I saw was the wooden edge of the bed. I thought it was nothing and turned back to look at my sister as she sifted in her sleep. But soon after I had turned away, I saw that movement again. I spun my head quickly to its direction, but again, I saw nothing. I got scared and moved closer to my sister. I shut my eyes tight and waited until sleep took over me. The next morning, I woke up to the absence of my sister. I peeked over the bedside before climbing the 3 steps down. I walked to the living room to find my sister watching the TV and went to watch the kids' show with her. I didn't mention that I had seen something moving next to the bed. I thought she would laugh and tell me it was nothing. The day went on like any other, but the later it got, the more uneasy I became. I found myself stretching the bedtime, but eventually, our mother told us to go to sleep, and that was final. We brushed our teeth and went to bed. Our parents came and kissed us goodnight. My sister again was fast asleep. I clutched my blanket and hoped that the moving had been just my imagination, but then it was there again. I was afraid of it, but I wanted to know what it was. I cautiously turned my head, but when I looked straight at it, it disappeared. I turned away, and as I had thought, it returned. I turned again to see it, this time slowly, and careful not to look straight at it. It worked. I saw what it was. A hand. A bony, brownish green hand with long black nails reaching over the rail of the bed. At this point, I was terrified. I automatically walked straight to it, only to see it quickly pull away, and as scared as I was, I crawled over my sister and looked over the edge to see what the hand belonged to. Nothing. Just the bare floor in the bottom bunk. I laid back in bed, and when I looked away, the hand rose over the edge again. I wanted to see it, but as the hand reached over the side and finally cribbed the edge, I couldn't take it anymore. So I looked at it, causing it to retreat. I stared at the spot where it always rose, and it didn't rise back, but I was getting tired and soon drifted to sleep. Each night was the same. I saw the hand, but never what it belonged to. I stopped seeing it when we moved to our current house, and me and my sister got separate rooms. I thought the hand had only been my imagination, fed by my fear of the dark, so I never mentioned it. It was a few years back that I was talking with my sister about our previous neighbors, a sweet old couple, when we started thinking of all kinds of things we remembered from that house. For the first time ever, I told her about that sickening green hand that I had kept seeing. She looked strangely at me and said, "I used to see it too." I never knew you existed before, but now you're all I can think about. From the moment I saw you, something within me said, that's it. That's the one. I was nervous because I've never been a guide before, but I know I'm ready for this moment. The last thing I remember before dying was reading a small card and looking up and seeing terrible red eyes peering into mine. Since this is my first time, I decided to do what my guide did for me. You finally step outside your car and walk inside, stumbling a little on the icy sidewalk and peering tentatively at the icicles above. If I was able, I would laugh at the memory of my mother. Perhaps it was my grandmother so long ago, warning me of the deadly danger that icicles pose. But now I know better. That isn't how death works at all. You slam the door behind you, but I glide through confidently, for I know I am still invisible to your eyes. You turn toward the bathroom, and I blush and choose not to follow. Instead, I explore your house and ponder on what sort of person you must be. I wonder if you will take this gracefully or filled with terror. I wonder if you are ready. I self-consciously pull at my long black robe and glance again at the card I hurriedly wrote, making sure my writing is legible. As you exit the bathroom and head toward the kitchen, I take my opportunity and lay the card gently on your table, where I know you must sooner or later notice it. Take your time though, we are in no rush. You hum Bohemian Rhapsody to yourself as you pull a frozen dinner from the freezer and pop it in the microwave. I consider starting a fire to make my first guiding experience more grand, but I think you would prefer it my way. I could almost feel an echo of my long stilted heart as you turn around and fixate on my note. Peering around anxiously, you bend down to pick it up and read it. I get into place because I know as soon as you read my name, you will be able to see me, and I must make myself terrifyingly presentable. This is so exciting. My name is Death. I am not the only death, but one of many. See, most people think of death as falling asleep and waking up on another side, but that's not right at all. Death is like being pulled by your ankle deep into the depths of the ocean, sudden, inexplicable, and suffocating. I am here to drag you there, for none can achieve death on their own. You shudder in confusion and look up to see me. A guttural and unearthly scream escapes your lips. Really, am I that terrible? And then I reach out for your hand and pull you through your dimension into mine. As the mortals see it, to your death.